Hello guys, and welcome back to the show. In today's video, we are going to build the front end part of the application that we've been building for the past few weeks. What we are going to do is to build these two components. So we are going to build this component, which will allow us to put in our name, the message, the mood that we are in, the objectives that we have, and if we have any regrets. So we are going to build this with React TypeScript, and then we will build a search component which will allow us to search the data that we store into ElasticSearch. So basically, if I put events that happen in my life over a course of a year, I can now go onto this search component and search for anything in ElasticSearch that matches whatever I type in over here. Okay, so we are going to build a form component and basically a search component. And then what we will do is to build these pages that you see. So let's get started and let's see how we can do this. To start, what we are going to do is to go onto the Create React App website, and then we need to go to the section that says adding TypeScript. You can find the link to this website in the video description. And what we are going to do is to copy this. Okay, so we are going to copy this. Make sure that you have Node.js installed on your machine. I've got tutorials on how to set up React applications, so I'm not going to go in depth into how to do it, but we are going to go over here and then copy this, go to the terminal, and then from the root of our application, what we are going to do is to copy this, paste it here, and then hit enter, like so. Now that this is completed, what I'm going to do is to cd into my app and then open this in Visual Studio Code, like so. Now inside of VS Code, what I'll do is that I am going to delete some stuff. Okay, so I'm going to delete everything that I do not need. I'm going to delete this as well. I do not need this. Actually, let me get rid of the test as well because I'm not ready to write tests for this application. And then I'll leave these app.css, index.css. I'll leave these two. And then what I'm going to do is that inside of source, I'm going to create a directory that I'll name component. Okay, like so. Then inside of this component, what I'm going to do is to create two directories. So I'm going to create a directory called form. Then I'll create another directory that I'll call searchbar, like so. And then inside of this form directory, what I'll do is to create a file, and I'll call this file form.tss. Okay, so I'll name it form.tsx. And then inside of the search bar, what I'll do is to create a file, and I'll name this searchbar.tsx. So I'll go over here and I'll create a searchbar.tsx, like so. Now inside of this form component, what we are going to do is to import React from React. So I'll say import React from React. Then what I'm going to do is to create a component called form. So I'll say const form. And actually, let me export this because I will need this in other places in my application. So I'll have the export over here. And this form will basically be a function that will return something. So it will return a form. So we can have a form like this. And then we can complete the details of the form later on. I want this form component to be reusable. So rather than, for instance, having an input field like so, okay, having an input field like this, which will have a value of, let's say, mood, what I'm going to do is to pass these values as props to the form. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to have a type called form prop. So I'll have a type, and then I'll call this type a form prop, and this prop will be passed by the page that uses the form. Okay, and we will see this later on as we progress through the application. So this form prop will basically have these things. It will have a handle submit, which is a function that will get called when we click on the submit button. Okay, so I'll have a handle submit, and this handle submit will basically be a function that will take an event, and the event type will be a react.form event. Okay, so I'll do a react.form event. Okay, and this form event will have a type, and this type will be an HTML form element. So I'll type in HTML form element, like so. and it will return a void. So it will not return anything. So I'll put void over here. Let me close this. So this is one of the prop that my form will take. It will also have another prop, which is onChange, which is basically used to handle the changes that goes on the form. So when we type anything, when we delete anything, this function will handle the changes that happen on the form. So I will say that it will have a prop called onChange, and this onChange prop will basically be an event. So I will type in event like so, and this event will be a React.change event. So I will say change event, and the type will be an HTML input element. So this has to be a form. So it's RM, okay? And then the type over here will be an HTML input element, and this will return a void as well. And the last thing that I would like the form to have is an initial data, okay? So I will have in an initial form data, which will be a type that I'll pass to it. So I'll have an initial form data, and this type will be a type that I will create. So let me call this form data like so, okay? So let's now create this form data type, and then we will come back to basically fill in the details that we need for the form. Now this form data will be in a directory. So let me create a directory called utils. So inside of source, I'm going to create a directory over here that I'll call utils, okay? And this utils directory will basically have a file that I'll call util.tss. So utils.txs, and this utils.tss will have an export type. So let me type in export and then the type, and this will be called form data. And this form data will have certain things, okay? It will have a username, which will be a string. It will have a message, which will be a string. It will have a mood, which will be a string. It will have what I plan to achieve, which will also be of type string. Then it will have an optional field called regrets, which will be a string. Later on, I plan to add a date field so that we can take notes of the data that we actually use the app to send data to the backend. So now that I have this form data, what I'm going to do is to go back into the form.txs file, and then I'll say that import, and I want to import form data. So I want to import this from utils/utils like so. So now what I'm going to do is that I'll say that this form will take in a prop, okay? And the prop will basically be of type form prop, okay? So I'll say prop of type form prop, and then I'll say that on submit should be prop, okay, dot handle submit, and we will define what this handle submit is as we progress through the application. And inside of here, what I'm going to do is to get rid of this, and then I'll say input. It will have a type, and the type will be of type text. It will have a name. I'll call the name username. Then it will have onChange, and the onChange will be the prop. So prop dot onChange. So I'll say prop dot onChange like so, and then it will have a value, so the initial value of the form, so that I can track it when it changes, okay? So this will be a state that I will set later on in my application, but for now the value will be prop dot initial form data, and I want the username like so. Then I want this field to be required, okay? So it is compulsory to fill this field, okay? Now I will do the same thing for the other fields. I don't want you guys to sit down and wait, so I'll go ahead and do that, and we will go through. So I've gone ahead and added the other input fields. So I've got an input of type text with the name called username, with a placeholder called name, and I have one for message, one for mood, one for what I plan to achieve, and then one for regrets, okay? But as you can see, I've added a class name to the input fields, but I do not have these styles defined. So what I'm going to do is to basically add the styles, okay? So inside of the form directory, I'm going to create a form.module.scss file. So I will come over here, then I'll say form.module.scss like so. The next thing that I'm going to do is to import this style into this component. So I'll say that import styles from, I want to import it from the form. So from this, So I'll say from form.module.scss like so. But before this thing can work, I need to add another dependency to my application, and that dependency is Node.Sass. So I'll go on Google, go on to npm, and what I'll do is that I'll have this. I'll copy this, okay? Go to the terminal. From the root of the application, I'll do npm install Node.Sass like so. Okay, so I have Node.Sass installed on my machine. So I'll go back to VS Code. Then I'm going to add some CSS to this, okay? So you can find the code for this tutorial in the video description, and then you can use the CSS that I'm actually using, or you can actually write your own CSS. Okay, so I have added the CSS that I actually want to use over here. So I've got this .form, and I have got .children class, and I've got the submit, and I've got something that I want to happen when you hover on the submit buttons, okay? And I've got this font family, which is called OpenSun, and I need to add this as well. So what I'm going to do is to create a directory that I'll call styles. So let me close this, and then inside of source, what I'm going to do is to create another directory, and I'll call this directory styles. And inside of styles, what I'll do is to create a file called _themes.scss. So I'll create _theme.scss like so. And inside of this _themes.scss, I'm going to put in this, okay? Using the Google Font API, I'm going to import OpenSun, okay? Then I have this color that I'm going to use internally within my application. Then I have got a variable called OpenSun, which basically maps to OpenSun. Another thing that I'll do is to go into my components, go into my form.module.scss, and actually import this styles, okay? This themes.scss file in here, so that I can actually use this OpenSun. So I'm going to import that from here, like so. Now what I'm going to do is to create the SearchBar component, okay? And then we can go on to build the actual page. So for the SearchBar component, what I'm going to do is to do the same thing. I'll import React from React, and I'm going to say export a constant called SearchBar, okay? And this SearchBar, what it will basically have is that it will return a form. So I'll say return a form like so. And then what I will have in the form is that I will have just two fields, okay? So I have the field to actually search, okay? And then I'll have a submit button. So I'll have two input fields. So I'll say input, and then the first one will basically be of type search. It will have a placeholder. I'll actually provide a prop for the placeholder. I should have done the same thing for the form, in order for the form to be basically reusable, because now I'm actually hard coding the placeholder for the form and actually the name for the forms. But if I want this component to be reusable, I should be able to pass all these things from the page. I would illustrate how to do this with the search bar. Okay, so for the placeholder, I will say that I'll pass you a prop, and the prop will have a placeholder. So I can pass the placeholder over here. Then I need to pass in the type, and I'll say it's called a search bar prop. I need to define what this search bar prop is. So I'll go into my utils, and inside of utils, I'll say export. And what do I want to export? I want to export an interface called search bar prop. Okay, so I'll say interface. I'll call this search bar prop, and this search bar prop will basically have a placeholder. And let me make this placeholder of type string. And actually, I think I made a mistake with this one, because I have a username, message, mood, what I plan to achieve, and then this should be regrets, because that's what I have in the backend, okay? Because in the backend, I'm expecting regrets, okay? So let me change this name to regrets, and then go back to the form, and then change this to regrets, okay? Let's change this to regrets, like so. Then I can go back to the search bar, then I can say that import. What do I want to import? I want to import this prop from utils, like so. Let me give it a class name for the styles. I'll call this styles.children. So I'll say styles.children, like so. And let me import styles. So I need to create a file, and I'll call this searchbar.module.scss, like so. Okay, and inside of this, what I need to do is to import. So I'll say import styles from searchbar.module.scss, like so. Then the last thing I'm going to do is that in this input, I'll have a type. I'll call this submit. Then I'll have a class name, and this will be style.submit. And I'm going to provide the CSS for the search bar. Okay. Again, you can find the CSS in the video description of this tutorial. Now I have the CSS for the search bar. So everything is looking great now. Okay. I have two components. So the form component and the search bar component. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is to create the actual page that will use these components, and I'll pass in the props that it needs. All right. But before we actually do that, let's see how these components actually look like now. All right. So that we can resolve any issues that we have with it before we actually start building the page. So to actually see how the components look like, what I'm going to do is to close this. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is to go into the app.ts file. So instead of this app.ts file, I will get rid of everything that I have over here. So I do not need any of this. Okay. And then I do not even need a class name. I'm going to get rid of the logo, and I'm going to get yes for now. Okay. And what I'm going to do is basically import the components that I have, and then just pre them. Okay. Just peek into them and see how they look like. So I'll say import. I'll import form, this form component. I import this from components, form, and then form, like so. All right. And then I'll have this over here, and I'll call this form. Okay. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is to import this search bar component. So I'll say that import, let me copy this, search bar from components, search bar, and then search bar, like so. Okay. And then I'm going to have this and make this search bar rather than form. So now let me start the React application, and let's see if we do get errors or if the application actually starts. Okay. So I go to the terminal, and then from the my app directory, what I'm going to do is to type in npm start, like so. As you can see, this is failing because we have not passed the props that the form and the search bar they need. So what I'm going to do is to comment out the form for now, and then provide the search bar with a random placeholder. So I'll comment out the form for now, and then for the search bar, what I'm going to say is that placeholder search me. Okay. Now let's go back to the front end, and as you can see, we have this search bar, but there are no styles on the search bar. So it means that our styles are not being picked up. So now let's go into VS Code and solve this. So I'll go to the search bar.tsx, and if I look at the form, as you can see, we do not have the class name. So I'll provide a class name, and I want this class name to be styles.search, like so. So now let's see if the styles have been picked up. And as you can see, we have a search bar, okay, that we can basically type into. This is great. Now let's go ahead and build the pages and give the form the prop that it needs so that we can actually see everything from end to end. All right. Now to create the pages, what we are going to do is to go to the source directory, and we are going to create a directory that we call page. So I'll come over here, and I'll call this pages. All right. And inside of this pages directory, what I will have are two folders, one for index and one for the ThoughtsPage. All right. So I'll call this index page. And then I'll have another directory which I will call ThoughtsPage. All right. So I'll call this ThoughtsPage. And let's do the index page because it's not going to take much time. And what the index page will basically have is that it will have an indexpage.module.scss file. And then we will have another file called indexpage.tss. All right. And now in this indexpage.tsx file, what we are going to do is to import React from React. So I'll say import React from React. The next thing that I'm going to do is to import the search bar. All right. So I'll say import search bar and then search bar, like so. And then I'll import styles from indexpage.module.scss. Okay. So I'll say import styles from indexpage.module.scss, like so. So I'll say export, I'll create a constant, Then I'll call this index page. And this will basically be a function. And what this function will do is that it will basically return a div. And this div will have a class name that I'm going to call styles.main. And then it will have an li tag. And this li tag will basically, I think I should call it new. Okay. So I'll call it new like so. And let me add the plus emoji here. Okay. So plus new, which will basically take you to the root where you can add your thoughts. Okay, so I'll have this plus new, and then I'll have another div. And what this div will have is that it will have the search bar component. Okay, so I'll add the search bar over here like so, and then I'll provide it the placeholder. Okay, and the placeholder, I will just say that search your thoughts. Okay, so search your thoughts, and then let me add an emoji here, and let me add a plus emoji here too. Okay, so this will be the search page or the index page or the main page. And whilst I'm here, I'm going to add the React router. So let's add React router as a dependency to application. All right, so what I'm going to do is to copy this and then go to the terminal and add this as a dependency. So I'll come to the terminal, and then over here, I'll do npm I React router like so. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to import link from React router DOM. Okay, so I'll say import from React. Actually, what I needed was the React router DOM. So what this one I'm going to actually install. Okay, so I'll come over here and then I'll install this one. And then I'll add the React router DOM 6 like so. Then I can now come over here and I will import link from React router DOM. And then now I can wrap my li tags inside of a link. All right. So inside of my li tags, what I'm going to have is a link. So I will basically have a link. So let's have a link like so. And then I can put this inside of the link like so. All right. Then I'm going to specify the path. So I'll say this link, if anyone goes to /new, that is when I want this link to be triggered. Okay. And then inside of my app, so if I go into my app.tss file, what I'm going to have is to import the browser router. What I'm going to do is to come over here and then import this. You can find the link in the video description. And now I'll say that I have a browser router, and inside of this browser router, what I'm going to do is to put the search component. All right, so I'll get rid of this, then I'll put the search component in here, then I'll have the roots, and now inside of this roots, what I want is to specify the roots. So I'll say root. Okay, and this root should be imported as well, and inside of this root I will have the path that if anyone goes to the /root, I want the person to be taken to the index page. So I will have the element, then I'll set the element to the index page. Okay, so I will specify that this element will take you to the index page. So I'll say import index page from pages, index page, and then index page like so. I can now go to the elements and I can put the index page in here. All right. And I can get rid of this search bar because now the search bar is inside of the index page. The next thing I'm going to do is to go into the index page module.scss, and then I'm going to add some CSS styling to this file. Okay, again, you can find this styling in the video description, or you can add your own. And this is basically the styling that I've added to the index page. So if I go to the index page, I have this .main, and I think I should add one more to this. Okay, so I'll have a class name and I'll call this the search. Okay, so I'll say styles.search. So let's start the React part of the application and let's see how this page actually looks like. And this is basically how it looks like. We have this over here. Let me resolve this now. So I'll go inside VS Code. I need to add a style over here. I'll call this style styles.new. I'll save this, and now we have this. It is not the best styling, but it will do for now. So now that we have the index page sorted, we can go to the thoughts page and actually write the code to build a thoughts page. All right. So inside of the thoughts page, what I'm going to do is to create a file, and the file will be thoughtspage.css. So I'll come over here, and inside of this page, I will import React from React. Then I will import the form because I will need it. I want to import this from the form and then form. All right. The next thing I will do is to import useState from React. So I'll say import useState from React, like so. Then what I'm going to do is to import the form data that we created inside of the utils. So if I go into the utils, we have this form data. All right. So I'll say import and then utils. And then let me import styles. So let me create the styles. So I'll say thoughts.scss. Then I'll say import style page.module. And the last thing that I would think I will need is the link from React DOM. So React router DOM. So now let's create this component, and we'll call this component ThoughtsPage. So I'll say export. I'll create a constant called ThoughtsPage, and this will be a function that will return something that I don't even know now. So let's put a div here, and then we will think about what this thing will return later on. So let's create an object that we can call an empty form state. All right. And this will basically have a username. I cannot think of a better way of doing this now, but I think I will improve it later on when I think of something better. But for now, let's make it username message. Okay, let's make this empty. Let's make this mood. These are basically the fields that we need for the form. What I plan to achieve, and these will all be empty, and then regrets. All right, we have an empty form data. Let's call this form data. So now we can create a state. So we can say that initial form data, and then we can have the updated form data. Okay, and the initial form data will be a useState of type form data. Okay, and if it is of type form data, it needs to have something of that shape. That is the main reason why I created this. So I'll put this here to be the initial form data. Now I can create my handle submit and my onChange functions. So I'll come over here and I'll create a constant that I'll call handle submit, because that is what the form actually expects. Okay, if I go to the form, if I go to the component form, you can see that the form wants a function with the name handle submit, and that's what I'm going to create. So if I come over here, and this will basically take in an event, and the type of the event is react.form event, and then it will have an HTML form element as a type. So when I submit the form, what I actually want to happen is that I want to take the things that were put in the form, put it in the body of a request, and then send it to the backend. So I am going to create another method that I will call post data. So let me create this method called post data. And what this post data will do is that it will have an event, and the shape of the event will be a form data. And then what I'm going to say is that this will return a fetch, which will take in an endpoint. The endpoint will be the endpoint that I made from the backend. And this is basically HTTP localhost port 8080/API/v1/event. And if you don't know what I'm talking about this endpoint. So if you come over here to the application, event store, source, and we go into the roots, this is the endpoint that we want to send a request to. All right, /API/v1/event. So now I will specify what the method is. So I will provide what the method is, and I'll say that the method is a post. Then I'll specify the headers to be content type application.json, and then the body will be a JSON stringify event. Okay, so I'll say JSON.stringify. So now if I click on the handle submit on the form, what I want to do is to call this post data, then I'll pass it the initial state. Okay, so the initial form data, and I'll say .then I want the updated form data, then I want to pass it the empty form data, and then I'll say events.prevent default would basically prevent it from reloading. So when someone submits a form, I actually want to update the form, so change the state to an empty form state so that I actually clean the form. All right, I actually clean the form and the fields become empty. The next thing that I'm going to do is to create the onChange function. So I'll say const onChange, and what onChange will have is that it will take an event of type React.change event, and obviously the type will be HTML input element. And when something changes, when the form changes, I actually want to update the elements or the fields that changed. So what I'll do is to use the update form data, and in this update form data I'll pass it an object, and then I will spread the initial data that I have in the form and then change whatever changed. All right, so I will say that event.target.name, I want the field that changed to be replaced by the value that was provided. So I'll say event.target.value, and then I'll say event.prevent default. If you don't understand this, I can show you a simple example. I'm going to create an object called A and then a C, which I'll call a C, like so. All right, and now if I want to update these fields, I can say that V will be, let me actually show you what this does. All right, when I spread A, it basically puts everything that I have in A inside of V. So I can say V like that, and then I can change the path that I want. So I can say the C will now be K, and as you can see, I have V and then C has been updated to K. So this is the same formula that I'm using to update the fields which are changed in the form. Okay, so I have an handle submit button, then I have an onChange button. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is to modify this div. I'll give this div class name, and I'll call this class name styles.main, and then I'll provide an li tag, and inside of this li tag I'll create a link, and this link will contain the form component. All right, so I'll have my form component over here like so. This link will have a path, so let me specify the two paths, and then I will map this to the search route. Okay, and then this form will need some props as well. All right, the props that this form needs is that it needs the handle submit, and this handle submit will be handle submit, which is the function that has been created over here. It will need an onChange, so onChange, and this onChange will be the onChange function that I just created. And the last thing that it needs is the initial form data. Okay, so the value, the initial form data, which will be used for the values. So for these values, okay, so what I'm going to do is to pass the initial form data. So I'll say initial form data, and this will be initial form data, which is basically the empty form data that I have over here. Okay, and the empty form data is inside of the initial form data. So basically I'll pass this over here like so. So now I have everything that I need. The last thing that I'm going to do is to add the CSS for this ThoughtsPage. All right, again, you can find the CSS in the video description, or you can add your own. And here I've added the CSS that I need for this ThoughtsPage. All right, so now let's add this ThoughtsPage to the app, and let's see how the application now looks. Okay, so I'll close this. I think the last thing that I need to do is that I need to remove this. So I made a silly mistake. I'm going to remove this. That should have like a search over here. And then what I'm going to do is to add another div like so, and have the form in here. Okay, so let me clean this thing up. And then what I'm going to do is basically have a class name and set this class name to styles.children. Okay, so I'll say styles.children, and then let me give this also a style. So I'll call this class name styles.search. So now I'm going to go into the app.ts file, and inside of the app.ts file, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to duplicate this, then I'm going to import the ThoughtsPage. So I'll say ThoughtsPage, then I'll import this not from the index, This will be ThoughtsPages and then thoughts like so. And now I can change this to be ThoughtsPage, and then I can make this /new. Now I'm going to start the React application and let's see what we get. All right. And this is what we have, which means that something is not really working. Let's fix the CSS and let's make this right. All right. I'll go to VS Code and I need to add one more style over here. So class name, I need to add the styles.form. So I'm going to say styles.form. So now let's look at the page again. Everything looks beautiful. So something is not working properly again. We have this. It takes us to the /new page. When I click on the search, what I want is that it needs to take me back to the / page. All right. So I'll go to the thoughts page and then this has to be /. So now if I come over here and I change this, I click here, it takes me back to where I need to be. Now that we have everything working, what we are going to do is to actually complete a form, and let's check if the form or if the data that we put in the form is actually stored into Elasticsearch. To do this, I'll start the backend. So I'll go into API, and inside of API, I'm going to run Docker compose app to start Elasticsearch and Kafka. As you can see, I have Kafka running, I have Elasticsearch running. So I'm going to start the API, okay? I'm going to start the backend, and I can do that by doing run. And this has created the Elasticsearch index, all right? So now I am going to run the front end as well. So I'll go into my app and I'll say npm start. I'll go to new and then name. I'll say Beatrice. Objective, I want to understand Elasticsearch. So now if I submit this, I expect this to basically work. But let's see if it does work. So as you can see, we are getting a course error, which is a cross-origin resource sharing error. And to resolve this, what we actually need to do is to tell our backend that you should accept a request from this endpoint, okay? So we need to make this endpoint available in our backend so that our backend will accept a request from localhost port 3000, okay? So now let's go into our backend and let's resolve this issue. Now, to resolve this error, what we are going to use is the course middleware provided by HTTP for us. Now, a middleware is basically a wrapper around the request that we send, okay? And using the course middleware, we can basically open our backend to accept a request from the React application. Let's see how we can do this in code. Inside of the backend, I'll go to server, and inside of server, what I'm going to do is to import the course middleware. We already have HTTP forest installed, so we can actually import this. All right. So let me import this. So let me say import or the HTTP forest.server.middleware.course. Okay, so I need this course middleware. Now, what I'm going to do is that before I actually create the server over here, I'm going to create a course service. Okay, and what this basically will do is that it will be a course. So I'll say course, then I'll pass the root, which is basically my backend root. So the /API/event root to course. Then I'll pass it a course config, and inside this course config, I'll pass it the endpoint of the React front end. All right. So I'll make the backend open to accept request from the React front end. So I'll say course config.default. So the default config will basically accept any request that comes to the backend, but that's not what I want. I want to allow just the React application. So I'll say that with allow origins, okay, and I'll set the origin to the React application. So I'll say set, then I'll provide it HTTP localhost port 3000, like so. Then I'll only tell it that the only method that it should allow is a post method, right? So I'll say .with allowed method, and the allowed methods that I want is the post request. So I'll say some, then I'll pass it a set, then I'll pass it a method.post, like so. And let me import this method from HTTP forest. So now I have this course service. So rather than actually passing this to the with HTTP app, what I'm going to pass is the course service. All right, so I'll pass this instead. And now I'm good to try again and see if I'm allowed to send a request to the backend. Okay, send a post request to the backend. Docker is running. I've got the server running, so the backend running, and I've got React application running. So now let's see if we are actually able to send a request to the backend. So I've got here, I'm gonna make the name Ben, message, I want to learn Scala, mood, I'm feeling happy, objectives, I want to learn React, and then regrets, no regrets. So if I click on submit, everything is cleared. I now do not have any error over here. If I check the logs from the back end, as you can see, I get a message, the event has been published and the record has been processed. And as you can see, the username is Ben. The message is I want to learn Scala. Mode is I am feeling happy. What I plan to achieve is I want to learn React. And then regret is no regrets today. Now let's query Elasticsearch and let's see if we can actually see the data that we just posted. All right, I'll send a request to the event index because the event index is the index that we created. I'll do slash, then I'll do search, then I'll do pretty. So if I run this, as you can see inside of the index, I get the username, which is Ben, message, I want to learn Scala, mood, I'm feeling happy, what I plan to achieve, I want to learn React, and then regrets, no regrets today. So I know that everything is working as it is supposed to work. The next thing we are going to do is to add the functionality that will allow us to basically go into the search index and then type in no regrets, hit enter, and then be able to get all the data inside of Elasticsearch that matches whatever we type in here. And we are going to do this in the next tutorial. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.